I have the referee's permission. Thank you very much, Melanie. And do we have our first diver on the board? We do. First diver, Matthew Dixon, Dive London Aquatics, forward 2.5 somersaults, Pite. 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7, 7.5. Declan Rogan, City of Sheffield, forward 2.5 somersaults, Pite. 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Simeon Gregg, City of Sheffield, forward 2.5 somersaults, Pite. 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Sebastian Wilcox, City of Sheffield, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free. Judge 7, please. 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Jordan Holden, City of Sheffield, inward 2.5 somersaults, Pite. 4.5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 4, 4.5. Conolano, Southend Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, Pite. 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 6, 4.5. Jack Law, City of Leeds, inward 1.5 somersaults, Pite. 8, 6.5, 7, 7, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Angus Menmuir, Edinburgh Diving, forward 2.5 somersaults, Pite. Judge 7, thank you. 7.5, 7, 6.5, 7, 7, 7, 7. Leon Baker, City of Sheffield, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. Seven, 6, 6, 7, 6, 6, 7. Hugo Thomas, Dive London Aquatics, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. Eight, 6, 6.5, 7.5, 7, 8, 7.5. Anthony Harding, City of Leeds, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. Seven and a half, 7, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 8.5, 8. Oliver Heath, Plymouth Diving, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Four, 4, 4, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4. Lachlan Stark, Edinburgh Diving, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Seven, 7, 7, 6, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Noah Penman, Aberdeen Diving, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5. Cameron Gamage, Southampton Diving, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. Five, 5, 5. 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Declan, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 4.5. Sebastian, forward 2.5 somersaults, pike. 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 6.5, 5. Connor, forward 3.5 somersaults with tuck. Three, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Jack, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 8.5, 8, 8.5, 7.5, 8, 8, 8.5. Angus, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked. 6.5, 7, 7, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 6.5. Leon, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 7.5, 7, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Hugo, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Anthony, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Oliver, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Lachlan, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Four, 4, 3.5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Noah, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five, 5, 5, 5, 6, 5, 4.5. Cameron, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 5, 4, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Round 3, Matthew. Back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Seven, 6.5, 6.5. 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Declan, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. Six, 6.5, 6, 7, 6, 7, 6.5. Simeon, reverse 1.5 somersaults, pite. Six, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Sebastian, back 1.5 somersaults, pite. 7, 6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6. Jordan, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Seven and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Connor, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6, 6.5, 6. Jack, back 1.5 somersaults, piked. Nine, 8, 8, 9, 8, 8.5, 9. Angus, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Leon, forward 3.5 somersaults with tuck. Six and a half, 5, 5.5, 7, 6, 7.5, 6. Hugo, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Eight and a half, 6.5, 6, 7.5, 7, 7, 7.5. Anthony, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Eight and a half, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Oliver, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. 6.5, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Lachlan, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free. Six, 5, 6, 6.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Noah, forward 2.5 somersaults, 1 twist, pite. Four, 4, 4, 5, 3.5, 4, 4. Cameron, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Five and a half, 5, 5, 4.5, 3.5, 5.5, 4.5. Round 4, Matthew, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six and a half, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Declan, reverse 1.5 somersaults, pite. Seven, 7, 7, 7, 7, 6.5, 7. Simeon, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, position free. Six, 5, 5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Sebastian, reverse 1.5 somersaults, pite. Six and a half, 6, 6.5, 6, 6, 5, 6. Jordan, reverse 2.5 somersaults, pite. Six and a half, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6. Connor, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6, 5 and a half. Jack, reverse 2 and a half somersaults with tuck. Eight, 7 and a half, 7 and a half, 8, 7, 7 and a half, 7 and a half. Angus, back 1 and a half somersaults, pite. Six and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6, 5 and a half, 6, 5. Leon, back 2 and a half somersaults with tuck. Four and a half, 4, 4 and a half, 3 and a half, 3 and a half, 4 and a half, 3. Hugo, forward 3 and a half somersaults with tuck. 5, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5, 3 and a half, 4, 3 and a half. Anthony, back 2 and a half somersaults with tuck. 6 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 6 and a half, 7, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Oliver, back 1 and a half somersaults, pite. 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 7 and a half, 5 and a half. Lachlan, forward 1 and a half somersaults, 2 twists, position free. Six, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 6, 5 and a half, 5. Noah, forward 3 and a half somersaults with tuck. 2.5, 2.5, 3, 3, 2.5, 3, 2.5. Cameron, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Matthew, forward 2.5 somersaults, 1 twist, pite. 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Declan, forward 3.5 somersaults with tuck. 3, 4, 4, 3.5, 4, 4, 2.5. Simeon, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, position free. 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3, 4, 3.5. Sebastian, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 3.5, 3, 3.5. Jordan, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. 8.5, 7, 6, 7, 7, 7.5, 6.5. Connor, forward 2.5 somersaults, 1 twist, pite. 4, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 3, 4.5. Jack, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 8.5, 8, 8, 8, 7.5, 8, 8. Angus, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 3.5, 3.5, 2.5, 4.5, 4, 3.5, 4. Leon, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4, 3. Hugo, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4, 3.5, 4, 5, 5, 4, 4.5. Anthony, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. 8, 7.5, 7, 8, 7.5, 8.5, 7.5. Oliver, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. 4, 3, 3, 4, 3.5, 3.5, 3. Lachlan, forward 2.5 somersaults, pite. 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Noah, back 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 3.5, 3, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3, 3.5. Cameron, forward 3.5 somersaults with tuck. 3, 3.5, 3, 2, 3.5, 2, 2. Final round of dives. Matthew Dixon, dive London Aquatics, inward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six and a half, 7, 5.5, 7, 5.5, 6. Declan Rogan, City of Sheffield, reverse 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 5, 6, 6, 6, 5.5, 5. Simeon Gregg, City of Sheffield, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked. Five and a half, 6, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Sebastian Wilcox, City of Sheffield, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked. Six and a half, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Jordan Holden, City of Sheffield, forward 2.5 somersaults, 1 twist, piked. Seven, 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 6.5, 7. Conolano, Southend diving, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked. Seven and a half, 7, 7, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 7. Jack Law, City of Leeds, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, position free. 8, 7.5, 7.5, 8.5, 7.5, 8.5, 7.5. Angus Menmuir, Edinburgh diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, position free. Five and a half, 5, 5, 5.5, 5, 3.5, 3. Leon Baker, City of Sheffield, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. 6.5, 6.5, 6, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 6.5. Anthony Harding, City of Leeds, forward 3.5 somersaults with tuck. Seven and a half, 8, 7, 8, 8, 8, 8. Oliver Heath, Plymouth Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, position free. Six, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Lachlan Stark, Edinburgh Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked. 6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Noah Penman, Aberdeen Diving, reverse 1.5 somersaults, 2.5 twists, position free. Six and a half, 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Cameron Gamage, Southampton Diving, forward 2.5 somersaults, 1 twist, piked. 7.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 6.5, 6. Thank you, divers. Thank you, judges. Thank you, recorder. We will have those results for you in just a moment. There will be now 25 minutes of training, 30 minutes for any changes to